Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Ron Filipkowski with us today. We'll chat with Ron in just a second. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe and rate and review, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. All right, it's been a cray week. Let's get into it. Let's start with the inauguration. What did you guys think?
Well, I was under the covers. I was under the covers for a good part of Monday, so it took me a while to pull myself together. I don't know why it hit me so hard on Monday as opposed to when Trump actually won, but it was a dark day. I'm not gonna lie.
It might be that he was actually being inaugurated as president. That might have been a catalyst.
You think?
Yeah, that could be it. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, before Monday, I had anticipatory grief, and then Monday, I decided not to really watch it, but to read the commentary on it on, various websites that were live blogging what was going on, and that was sufficient to keep up to date. And then we saw the video clips of everything afterward, and it was about as bad or worse than I could have imagined.
I know you have some thoughts on Jeff Bezos' wife.
Oh, did you see her at the event? I mean, she got to sit in.
How could you miss her?
Well, I also
Zuckerberg didn't
I was also
miss her.
just watching. I mean, I was like reading what was going, like the New York Times, and I don't recall seeing her. What was so special?
There's clips of Zuckerberg ogling her boobs,
Yes.
and he's thinking like, "Hey, I should start a social media app to rate those things."
And then behind her and all of the broligarchs were the cabinet members who will all be confirmed, no doubt. So they got front and center.
Yeah. My most fun thing, because I did try to find the fun in this horrible event, was seeing Melania's protective headgear.
Yes.
Yes, that was good.
That was
Yes.
awesome.
Like he went in and he's like, hey, the brim on this thing, it's like, I can. And she's like, I know. That's exactly why I put it on.
I think they're called Elizabethan cones, the things you put on your pet when the pet can't scratch their face. And that's what I thought of when I saw it.
Yeah, it was almost like, it was like a chastity belt for the head, in my opinion.
He
Kept him away.
got so close. It was like...
It was the most awkward thing I've ever
I
seen.
think it's the closest thing to kissing her. It's been for a long time for him.
All right, so he's finishing up his first week. It was a very eventful week. I believe there were 1.7 million executive orders that he signed. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them about immigration. I mean, seriously, got to deal with those scary black and brown people.
Well, that's why he was elected.
Yeah. But, and this is why Optimistic Andy exists, the courts pushed back the executive order on birthright citizenship, saying, excuse me, Mr. President, your pen is not mightier than the Constitution.
I'm going to just diverge for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
The place where my mind goes and has gone from the beginning is national security. And that scares me so much. So 50 people were stripped of their clearance. And then I think the people that he's going to be putting in high power positions won't need CIA clearance and things like that. And that is terrifying. Terrifying.
Yes, I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and I was saying, there's so much stuff that's happening that, A, would be happening under any Republican president. Elections have consequences. Sometimes one party, in this case, or in most cases, the Republican Party does things that either are just outrageous and or dangerous. And then the cyclical nature of politics takes over, and a new administration or a new Congress comes in, and things are different. When I say I'm optimistic on some level, it's like none of this shit's bringing down the cost of eggs. So if I'm going to give voters the benefit of the doubt that that's what they voted for, economic challenges, wanting to improve their daily lives, make food, gas, housing more affordable. All of these things, almost everything he did this week in his blizzard of EOs has nothing to do with helping the people who voted for him. How do we win in 26? We win in 26 by pointing out to a few million people that this guy lied to you. He didn't deliver on his promises. He's already not delivering on almost all of the day one promises. The Ukraine war is not over. All of the hostages in Israel aren't returned. There's no tariffs. There's so much that's just not going to get done. But most importantly, he's not bringing down the price of groceries. He's not going to bring down the price of gas. He's not going to make housing more affordable unless there's an economic crash. So, yes, you're right, Jen. Those things are scary. But they're not serving the goal that he had for people of helping them in their lives.
I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Number one, yes, I do think he's not going to do things that help the people who voted for him. And number two, he's going to do incredible damage to the country. And he started quite quickly, actually. So the fact that he hasn't brought down the price of eggs, and that will mean in 2026 that we will potentially win back the House, doesn't mean that he won't start a nuclear war in the meantime.
All I'm saying is that we have seen that the system on some level is holding. And so we have to believe in that Constitution. And we have to believe that our courts and our judges are going to uphold that Constitution. But to your point, there's a lot of other stuff that is really upsetting. It's going to hurt a lot of people. And look, I don't know how else to say it. That's just what happens when a guy like him gets elected. And, you know, Republicans claim they voted for certain things. I hope they're disappointed when those things aren't fulfilled. And, you know, a lot of Democrats voted for Trump. A lot of Democrats stayed home. And you know what? Now you're getting what you paid for.
For sure. Yep.
So this is the cost of that election result. We just have to focus on 26, turn that Congress, and then win back the White House in 28. What I'm saying is, let's take our fucking wins, when and where we get them, and build on them. It's emotionally healthier. And in practical terms, it's what's going to enable us to win the next elections.
Yes. So there will be Republican infighting. It will be the gang who can't shoot straight. Yes, there'll be horrible, horrific, scary, dire, and negative economic consequences to many Americans. And in tandem with this, I would like to see Democrats start putting out very simple, thoughtful messaging to counteract what is happening. I need a hero. I need a hero like till the end of time. There's a song that goes like that. Mm-hmm. That's what I want, man. I want that now.
Okay. I'm with you.
Okay.
And let's talk about the eggs.
Of course.
The eggs are 37% higher than a year ago. It's because of the birds. The bird flu. The Biden birds. So I made an executive order this week to protect the birds. Everybody knows the eggs come from the birds, not the chickens. Nobody's talking about that. We're going to vax the birds. Give the birds the vaccine. Bobby doesn't like that, but we got to do it. We got to do it.
I was going to say, you better do it before Bobby gets in.
Oh, my God. All right. Let's get to our winners and losers.
My winners, Dave Chappelle and Bishop Budd, for encouraging Trump to be his best and most compassionate self. My loser, the media. The very least the media can do in these 4 years is call what politicians say and what they do, what they actually are, lies. I do not want to hear things like false and misleading claims anymore.
My winners are Apple, Costco, Chase, and Goldman Sachs for committing to DEI and explaining that the initiatives actually help them be better companies, even while Trump is trying to dismantle DEI everywhere else. My loser is Senate Republicans who are blindly loyal to Trump and clearly value power over principle. And we're going to see them pretty much rubber stamp his nominees, no matter how unqualified they are.
I have two winners, no loser. My first winner, Anders Vistisen, a right-wing Danish member of the European Parliament who said, quote, "Dear Mr. President, listen very carefully. Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, fuck off." My next winner, Mississippi Democrat State Senator Bradford Blackman, who introduced a bill this week that would make it illegal for a man to masturbate or engage in other sexual acts when they have no, quote, intent to fertilize an embryo. The Contraception Begins at Erection Act was inspired by the influx of legislative bills in recent years focused on women's bodies and their reproductive rights. All right, it's time for the weekly rant. I don't understand why congressional Democrats are criticizing Joe Biden for having pardoned members of his family in the final minutes of his presidency. It's just such a bad example, they say. It makes it easy for Donald Trump to pardon his family when he leaves office. Such statements and criticisms are at best naive and misguided, and at worst intellectually dishonest and dangerous. Never before in American history has an incoming president so brazenly threatened to weaponize the Department of Justice and the FBI against his opponents and his perceived enemies. These are individuals whose biggest crime, in his mind, has been disloyalty and their commitment to their jobs, their loyalty to country, not party, and their dedication to defending and protecting the rule of law, the Constitution, and their beloved democracy. Never before has a United States president entered the Oval Office, consumed by anger and grievance, and unleashed a series of pardons, which include the release from prison convicted felons who pled guilty to violent crimes and vicious assaults on police officers, and who were judged by a jury of their peers to have assisted in an attempt to overturn an election and overthrow the government. Never before have we had a U.S. president who himself is a convicted felon. To say these are extraordinary circumstances, smothered in unprecedented autocratic threats, would be a colossal understatement. Given his past statements and current actions, especially given the extremist loyalists he's nominated to serve in his cabinet, the belief that Trump would go after members of Biden's family is well-founded, especially given the relentless accusations these past 4 years relating to the imaginary Biden crime family. To the other point, Donald Trump is going to do what Donald Trump wants to do, regardless of what anyone else does or doesn't do. He doesn't need a permission slip from Biden or anyone else. He does whatever the fuck he wants, when he wants, to whomever he wants, about whatever he wants. So it's infuriating that Democrats would willingly engage in the same kind of reprehensible both sides-isms normally spewed by the right. Shame on them. So yeah, if I were Joe Biden, I'd sure as fuck preemptively pardon my family too, in the face of the most powerful individual in the world who's placed a prosecutorial bullseye on their backs. And if I were a Democrat in Congress, I'd focus on the constitutional crisis knocking on our door and the existential threat to democracy it poses, and stop wasting time, energy, and the limited currency we have on bullshit. All right, let's bring out Ron Filipkowski. He is a former U.S. Marine, state prosecutor, federal prosecutor, police academy director, lifelong Republican, Republican Club president, and was appointed by Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis to the Judicial Nominating Committee. Ron was a Republican against Trump in 2020 and switched parties January 7th, 2021. He left private practice a year ago to become editor-in-chief of Meidas Touch, and he is co-host of the podcast Uncovered, which focuses on covering the MAGA movement. Ron, welcome into the back room.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite.
I'm a big fan, love your stuff, so it's an honor to have you here. I want to start talking about you, and then we'll talk about the craziness that's going on out there. So, your Twitter bio, one of the things that you say in it is Republican Party Insane Asylum Escapee. What does that mean?
It certainly has turned into an insane asylum since 2016. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. Especially there's so many new people that are in the Republican Party now that were not there pre-Trump. And a lot of them are the most crazy, people out there. So I really saw with my own eyes, like how they took over the party, took over county meetings at the grassroots level, not just Trump, and hijacked the party, this fringe element, which is now in control of the party. So that's why I say I feel like an escapee from like someone who used to be reasonably happy living in that neighborhood, and then some crazy people moved in and I had to leave, so that's kind of what happened. So
yeah, and just for people who listen to this podcast who may not be familiar with you, just to sort of shore up your ex-Republican bona fides, your first son is named Ronald Reagan Filipkowski, right? So
yeah, that's right, back in 1993. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah, but of course today you'd be, you're a rhino, right? Or an ex, whatever however they would.
Yeah, I guess.
But when you name your kid Ronald Reagan, that's commitment.
Yeah, well, I was kind of like the Alex Keaton, guy from, what was it, Family Ties, that show. That was sort of me back then, growing up with somewhat liberal parents at the time. And, I was very conservative, definitely very like business oriented, all that kind of stuff. Wanted to be an economist, obviously a lot changed over time, but sure, that was me back then. So yeah, I wanted to name my second son Winston Churchill, Filipkowski, but my wife would not allow that. She vetoed that. So he ended up being Colin. But yeah, I came up through the ranks. I was a Republican club president, general counsel, a local party, all that stuff. So was like Barney Frank Filipkowski not an option? Yeah, it's funny because I grew up on Cape Cod. My congressman, Barney Frank, was the congressman, I think, in the neighboring district from Cape Cod, and he was near Boston. My congressman was actually Jerry Studs, who back then was pretty infamous. He was censored for having a relationship with his page. so yeah, no, I wasn't naming them after Barney Frank back then, no.
And so you've referred to yourself now as a conservative Democrat. What does that mean?
Yeah, I guess moderate would probably be the best way to describe it, I guess, because I consider myself largely the same person. My views have changed on a lot of things, especially social issues over time. My foreign policy views have not changed a jot from 30 years ago. I still have the same views largely with that. But also, like, in terms of economics, I considered myself very conservative back then, definitely more moderate now, where back then I probably would have been in my 20s, against virtually every social program besides Social Security, Medicare, but probably almost everything else. But my views have definitely changed on that. I realize now, as you mature and you get older and you read more and you become better informed, that many social programs have uplifted so many Americans and are very important to our society, to our economy, to also curb the abuses of big business and corporations. I didn't really fully understand that or see that in my 20s. I definitely see it now.
You wrote an interesting Substack just about 2 weeks ago. It's called My Story and Why I Switched from Republican to Democrat. I strongly urge my listeners to read it because it really does explain with a lot of substance what I think a lot of ex-Republicans who really did understand the turn of events in this country, the changes within the Republican Party, and how, like a lot of people have said, my party left me, I didn't leave my party. So it is a great read. One of the things I found so interesting in it, because it really resonated with a lot of the way I feel, you were talking about when you first kind of started to feel this way was, I think, in 2008 when Barack Obama was running for president, and you were very involved in Republican politics on the local level, and you were at a meeting, and you were just sort of aghast at the way people were talking about him. You said, quote, "But their hatred of Obama was something visceral, something different. It wasn't about policy differences. I began to realize that race was the main reason why." And so a lot of folks today insist that Kamala Harris's loss was due to the economy and immigration. Others, myself included, believe it was because of sexism and racism. Did what you witnessed in 2008 rear its ugly head again last November?
Well, that's a good question. Because honestly, like there were so many policy and campaign strategy issues that I thought led to the defeat that I didn't as much consider that this time around, because I thought there were so many other things that you could point to as the reason for the loss. But there are some who make the point, not just race, but gender, the fact that with Hillary, maybe there was a vote that wasn't showing up in the polls because she led in all the polls, of course, right up until Election Day, pretty substantially. That maybe there is this undercurrent of, and I've even heard some Democrats say now, we cannot nominate a woman in 2028 or we're going to lose because people won't vote for a woman. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I mean, there's only been 2. So I don't know that that's the reason, but I suppose it could be. But, I will say I wasn't in, this time around, of course, I wasn't behind the scenes in Republican meetings where I was able to see that this time. So I don't know if race was a factor, but I just tend to think by now the people who are going to vote that way are already, in the Republican camp firmly now. And so they were going to vote that way either way. I don't think that there's a big chunk of like independent, no party affiliation voters who are voting based on race. I don't know. That's never going to be able to be polled though, because no one's ever going to answer that question honestly.
Right.
When I used to pick juries, I did 300 jury trials in 29 years, which is a tremendous number, which means I stood in front of jury pools of 50, 60 people 300 times and questioned and asked them some of these questions. So when you're representing a minority client, a Black or Hispanic client, and you're in a pretty much predominantly white community, your jury pool is going to be white. What you have to do is you have to identify who are the racists on that jury panel. But, you can't say, who doesn't like Black people? Raise your hand, because they're not going to do that, right? So the art is to figure out who the racists are through other kinds of questions.
Yeah, maybe the question is, how do you feel about the price of eggs? That's how you get to it. Because it's a lot easier to say, I don't like the price of eggs than it is to say, I'm a racist. So I think you're right.
No one's ever going to admit to being a racist. Very few.
Yeah.
But you can smoke them out, by going through different, back channel ways, Well, and I learned how to do that as a lawyer.
Another thing that you wrote in this piece that really resonated with me, because it speaks to what we're talking about the underlying motivations for why people voted for Trump or didn't vote for Harris. And you said, quote, Trump was everything conservatives said they were against in every way, in his personal life, his business dealings, his character, personality, everything. He was obviously racist, pretending to be religious when he was not, pretending to be a brilliant businessman when he was not a good father or husband, a draft dodger, misogynist. So when I read that, it's like, that's where I get back to hypocrisy. It's like, is it really the eggs? Is it really all the things they say they're upset about? Or is it racism? Because that's the one thing they can connect on. Because to your point, they can't connect on who he is as a person. They can't connect on his beliefs or lack thereof and his character, because it does go against everything a true conservative has believed since the beginning of time. So what is it? Right. What is it that attracts them, connects them, and keeps them with him if it's not racism and sexism?
Because all of those things are what they sold us. I mean, me being a very young Republican at the time, about Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. All of those things they said were Clinton's character flaws, right? The adultery, the draft dodging, all of these kinds of things. And yet along comes Trump, who's whatever flaws Clinton has, he has times 10. And they excuse all of them. And I'm like, wait a minute. I grew up in this party where you told me all of these things really matter, how much character matters. And now you're saying none of it matters because we need to win. And, and being honest, another part, they used to talk about Bill Clinton lying, and it's like, okay, yeah, Bill Clinton told some whoppers from time to time. But I mean, Trump lies like he breathes. I mean, every other sentence is a lie.
Right.
So it's like all of a sudden that stuff doesn't matter to us anymore. I'm like, wait a minute, it matters to me. Like, but yeah, when you look at the consistent thread as to what unites these people, yes, it's their hostility towards immigrants, people of color, women being in charge of things, gays, gay people, trans people, people that are different, and when you follow right-wing social media every single day like I do, that's what you do. I mean, I'll give you an example. I just saw a post where it went viral on right-wing social media where they put up a picture of Kamala Harris's stepdaughter and Barron Trump. And Barron Trump is like dressed in a suit with a vacant look on his face, like he always has, but looking sort of like a Damien kind of creature in like this black suit. And then you've got Emhoff's daughter, who's like, got some purple hair and a pink shirt, and she's looking very artsy and got some piercings. And they were saying like, these are the two Americas. And that's really their worldview, right? Here's this 18-year-old kid. They've never heard him speak. They know nothing about Barron Trump. No one's ever heard him speak in public. And yet they're saying this is the ideal, this big, tall, white guy in a suit versus this creative, artsy woman. This is a Democrat, and that really sort of defines them.
Yeah, well,
the way that they look at the world.
It sort of harkens back to Hitler's Aryan fantasies, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, that's why a lot of that old Nazi stuff is really being revived on the right. I mean, they're more subtle about it, in their messaging. But I mean, it's right there. And if you consume a steady diet of it every day like I do, it becomes even more obvious, the coded messaging.
Quick question on Musk's salute. What's your take on that? What do you think it was, or what his intention might have been? I know it's hard to speculate on that, but what do you think?
It's hard, but, following Musk as closely as I do and, the people around him, what I think is it was almost a subliminal thing. I don't think he consciously did it intentionally, like, I'm going to salute you as a Nazi leader. I think it's just something that's in him that comes out from time to time. And he gets caught up in the moment. It's sort of like they talk about when people drink, that's when they tell the truth because they sort of let their guard down. I think that happens to him at these Trump rallies where he gets so caught up in the emotion of, this right-wing idolatry
and the attention
that the deep down truth in him comes out. And look, he made a post this morning, which was defending apartheid. He made a post this morning about it. So, I mean, these are the things that if you follow Musk, it's just constant. It's just this constant, like, hey, you know what? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe South Africa was better under apartheid than it is today. That's a consistent theme of Elon Musk's social media account, among many, is to suggest that, apartheid wasn't really that bad of an idea. So, yeah, I don't think he consciously said, this is my Nazi salute. I just think that's the inner Nazi in him coming out.
And we've already seen a bit of a rift now between him and, I'll say, at least the Trump team, specifically over this AI mega deal, which he attacked. How long do you think this bromance is going to last?
Well, I think there's multiple rifts. That's part of it. And I think Trump was annoyed by that yesterday when he was asked by the press about it. He got very snippy. And he's like, well, look, Trump makes this big announcement, right? He's saying, I have this big infrastructure announcement to make. I saw the little thing that he put out and I'm like, what the hell is he talking about now? And he's going to promise something in 2 weeks again. What could it be that he's going to announce infrastructure? And I thought it had to do with like the border wall, maybe. But then, he's got Sam Altman and OpenAI in the Oval Office, and they're announcing this $500 billion investment. And of course, immediately when I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, like Musk hates Sam Altman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know that they're intense rivals. They have been for a long time. And I'm like, what is Musk got to think about this? Well, obviously, Trump does some stuff without clearing it with Musk because he doesn't have to. And Musk does the same thing to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stepping on each other's toes on an almost daily basis lately. The other one was the H-1B visas that Musk came out on Christmas Day of all days. He came out in favor of expanding the H-1B visa program, which Trump has always been against, and MAGA always is against this program, and they want to do away with it. And so that caused a big rift, and that actually ended up leading to Vivek Ramaswamy's exit from the DOJ committee was over that issue. So it's like on an almost daily basis, because their interests are not the same. I mean, in some ways they're the same. Yes, deporting migrants would be one example, but in many ways it's not. I mean, and so Musk being able to, first we heard that this was going to be an advisory committee. Then we heard that Musk has gotten inside the executive office building, which is across the street from the White House, and was going to have offices in there. Now we hear he's in the West Wing. He's got an office in the West Wing with top secret security clearance. This is not what we were told was going to happen a month ago. So I think that they are going to continue to butt heads in a lot of areas. I don't think this relationship is going to last through the whole presidency. I think it will last at least a year because it's in their best interest to do everything they can to get along. But I just don't know how they're going to be able to get along with their divergent agendas.
Yeah, and what I call their GDE, ginormous dick energy. So
that too. That might be more important than all the other stuff.
Yeah. And so how do you explain, sort of riffing on what we've been talking about sexism, racism, et cetera, or the economy and immigration, how do you explain MAGA and those people in the movement? Who are they to you?
I think they're Tea Party type people. I mean, if you go back to 2008, and who was running for president? McCain, right? So there was a lot of hardcore right wingers who did not like John McCain. I heard from them on a daily basis. A lot of it was over immigration. McCain was fairly liberal when it comes to immigration from a border state. And that was their main antagonism towards him. And the fact that he sometimes voted with Democrats, had many good friends who were Democrats. All of that stuff annoyed far-right activists about him. So they broke off during the 2008 presidential campaign and formed the Tea Party movement and all of those clubs and stuff. And I think that was the genesis of MAGA. That's how it basically started. So you had those people, and then you had all these other people in 2016 who were new that I described in my article that I had never seen before, suddenly showing up to meetings. And many of them never voted before. They were definitely not Republican before. They were sort of agnostic about and by the way, these people don't show up to midterm elections either. Mm-hmm. They only show up when Trump is on the ballot. Mm-hmm. So their loyalty is only to Trump. Mm-hmm. It really is not to the Republican Party. There might be other Republicans that they like, but primarily, like, they have no loyalty to party, and they'll tell you that right up front. I'm not a Republican. I'm MAGA, and being Republican is part of the deal right now. But, I think if Trump was gone, exit the stage tomorrow, a lot of them would leave the Republican Party. I absolutely do. So that's really who, like, the MAGA movement is. It's a collection of, like, far-right Tea Party people who never liked the Republican establishment. It's a collection of all these new people who are largely white, largely rural, no college education, who came into the party, who Trump figured out how to push their buttons and use coded language to excite them. And then there's the third chunk of it, which is like a lot of old school Republicans who have been radicalized. And I've seen that with a lot of people, senior citizens even, who are saying things now that they never said 10 years ago. They'd be like, I mean, take the case of Mike Lee. I mean, look at Mike Lee's transformation from like 8 years ago. He's a completely different person right now in what he says and how he votes and what he does. Completely different. And there's so many Republican politicians who are like that, because I think that they came to the realization that, like, I've either got to go along with this program that has taken over the party, or I'm going to get voted out. I'm going to lose a primary. And so they just decided to go along with the program.
In your piece, you also referred to the plan you created to fight Trump and MAGA. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so really, what I saw was, in monitoring them as closely as I did, was that, the MAGA movement and the Trump phenomenon is not a top-down movement. It's not, and that's the mistake that so many people have when they look at this from the outside looking in, is they think like these are all cultists. Trump comes up with these ideas, he puts it out, and they all follow his ideas. But when I watched it very closely, I saw that's not true at all. That is not how this operates. Trump has no ideas. He has no original thoughts. Everything he gets comes from a collection of right-wing influencers, podcasters, your Dan Bonginos, your Ben Shapiro's, your Charlie Kirks. We could go on and on and on. There's about 100 of them. Steve Bannon, there's a bunch. And I saw how they would generate ideas. They would be latched onto by people in Trump's orbit, like Stephen Miller, Jason Miller, Don Jr., all these other people. Then they would feed them to him. Dan Scavino is another one who's by Trump's side all the time and monitors all of these people. And then Trump would kind of sift through this bag of beans and pick out the ones that he liked and put them out as his ideas. And then the cultists underneath the influencer level would then follow the plan, right? So it was like things would flow from the middle influencer level up to Trump and then down to the group. So what I figured out is the only way you're going to defeat this movement is you're going to have to go at the influencer people. Because that's what generates everything. The ideas, the enthusiasm, the activism, the money, it all comes from them. It doesn't really come from Trump. So the only way you're going to defeat this movement is to defeat those people, to discredit those people, to fact check those people, to show how they lie, to show how they steal, to show how they grift their own people and expose those people. Because what I found is media ignored all of those people. They paid no attention to them. Media is so focused on Trump and everything that he does and everything he says, and they don't pay attention at all to the people who really drive the MAGA train, which is people like I just mentioned. And so my idea was to create a team to really go after those people and show how they lie, show how they steal, show how they grift, show how their operation works. And that's sort of the idea that I came up with. I was hoping somebody would just finance a team of like 6 or 7 people that would do nothing 24/7 but go after the MAGA movement. Nobody was willing to do that because political consultants wouldn't make any money off that. They make money off producing ads. And we saw $2 billion worth of ads spent in the last campaign. So after you've already put out the 526th abortion commercial in Pennsylvania, why do we need to keep spending 10 more million to do the 600th abortion ad in Pennsylvania? I was saying if some PAC put $1 million towards that team for a year, we could really do some serious damage. But instead they thought running that 600th abortion ad in Pennsylvania was a better use of their money. So that was the plan that I had, and I pitched it to a lot of different PACs. And I just gave up eventually until, Ben called me from Meidas in, like February of last year and said, I have an idea how to put your plan into practice, but in a little bit of a different way. And we kind of combined and came up with, what we're doing right now.
It's interesting. I've had Rachel Bidakoffer on this podcast a bunch, and she said the same thing. Like, she's had a plan to really go after and attack what needs to be addressed. And it just seems like the powers that be are so stuck in the status quo and can't get out of their own way and end up doing things business as usual. And then look what happened.
Yeah, they're stuck in a very 1990s style politics. The same kind of focus groups, the same ads, the same messaging, and it doesn't work anymore. The world has changed. The world of social media, things move fast. People get information from all these different alternative sources. And so, doing ads on Good Morning America or, ESPN or something, I'm not saying they're completely ineffective. They still work for somewhat, but year after year, these polls come out showing where people get their news from and what people watch. And every single year, the number of people who are watching and consuming mainstream television goes down. And the political campaigns continue to focus their money and their attention on those platforms when it just seems nuts to me. And I think part of the problem is that the consultant class has figured out an amazing grift where they're making tens of millions of dollars every single election cycle. And they're already back up and running right now for 2026. Send us all your money and we got to defeat Trump, right? And it's like, you just spent $2 billion, the last cycle. What did you do with it? So I just think we desperately, part of the problem is we have a consultant class that's very greedy and is grifty. And we have the politicians making the decisions who are very old in this party, very old and stuck in the past. And we've got to get younger. We've got to get more innovative, more creative. And I'm not being ageist. I mean, there's some oldish people who agree with all of this, but they're not running the party right now.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying, because after the election, Kamala's team went on Pod Save America. It was a post-mortem. And the one thing they didn't blame was themselves.
Yeah.
So you're right.
I mean, that's the establishment talking to the establishment. That's the people who lost, talking to each other about why they lost.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, you're not gonna get anything new and exciting from that.
Yeah.
They are making a lot of money. Everybody associated with that group makes a lot of money.
Yeah. So we're about to finish up Trump's first week. What's your biggest takeaway so far?
I'm going to say that since I paid so close attention to everything he said during the campaign, read his website, watched all his videos, none of this is a surprise. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say my biggest takeaway is this: Stephen Miller's running the country. That's the bottom line. A lot of the people online and social media said, President Musk, and we all joked about that. I did too, because Musk was always, that's the guy we saw, and he was always in Trump's orbit and everything else. But, as this week has unfolded, it's painfully obvious Stephen Miller is really the guy running the country, because Musk has kind of got his own little agenda, which is, in certain areas, somewhat limited. And Trump just wants to be president. He wanted immunity. He wants to be able to make many billions of dollars off the presidency. He likes the power. He wants to hunt down his enemies, all of that. But Trump's not a policy guy, And so when I look at these executive orders, they're all written by Stephen Miller. Mm-hmm. And, because I read them 2 years ago when Stephen Miller put them out as policy proposals. They're all his stuff. I mean, yes, the Project 2025, people all contributed to that. But to me, I always viewed Democrats' obsession with Project 25 as a magnificent distraction, because we didn't need to try and spend all that time trying to prove that Trump really, the Project 2025 agenda was really Trump's agenda. We didn't need to do that, because if you went to Trump's own website, it mirrored it.
Right.
Pretty much. And most of that stuff was written by Stephen Miller. So, when I watch Trump sitting there in the Oval Office signing executive orders and they're handing them to him and he's like, "What's this?" and they're giving him a 1-sentence explanation and he signs it, that proves to me Stephen Miller's running the country, because all those orders are written by him and Trump's just signing them and holding court with the press. And the other disgusting thing about that is the press who's in that room are all saying, wow, isn't this great? We went through 4 years where we had no access to the president. We didn't have this give and take. We couldn't ask him questions in the Oval Office. And, but now, we got a president who does all that. Isn't this great? So those are my impressions so far.
Yeah, well, the media certainly seems quite neutered right now. The genius of Trump is that he's brilliant when it comes to messaging. Like, he's recently said about the fires out in L.A., he blamed it on the water that was turned off from the north. And he said, all they got to do is turn the valve. And he has such a genius way of incorrectly and intentionally falsely taking very complicated things, like how water gets around California.
He blamed it all on a fish.
On fish and a valve. Like, there's a valve. And he said, you just turn it back on.
But they won't turn it on because they don't want to harm the smelt.
Yes, but
that's a slogan.
But the point I'm making is, if you go to a Trump rally or whatever and you ask them about California, they'll be like, yeah, they turned the valve off. And that's enough for them. Whereas, like, to your point, Democrats, we get so mired in the minutia of things, Project 25, autocracy, fascism, that the average person either doesn't care about or doesn't understand, and they just get lost. When all they want is turn on a valve, turn off a valve, right? The equivalent of that. That's why they always talk about
Can I give you an example?
Bill Clinton being the explainer-in-chief. Like, we seem to have lost the ability to explain shit in a very simple, clear way.
Right. Let me give you an example. So during the pandemic, of course, during 2020, gas prices went way down because nobody was using gas, right? People weren't traveling, people weren't driving, production was still way up. So gas prices went way down. So then we have this pent up, economic energy that kicks back on in 2021, and production had gone down by then. Saudis cut their oil production way down and gas prices spike, right? And we also had supply chain issues and all of that. So there was many reasons why gas prices went up. But of course, what did Trump do? What did the Republicans do? It's Biden's fault. Gas prices were low. This is what it was when I left office, which was after 1 year of a pandemic when no one's using gas. And here's what it is now. And then they put out stickers, and all the influencer level activist people with tens of millions of listeners, podcast listeners, and internet people that follow them put out stickers. I did that. Joe Biden with the finger. I did that. And they started putting them on gas pumps all over the United States. I did that next to the price of gas. And I saw them everywhere, gas pumps. In 2022, 2021, and 2022, these stickers were all over gas pumps, right? So I'm screaming because I know the reasons why gas prices are up. And I'm like, why is the administration silent? Why are Democrats not talking about this? Why are we fighting back about this ridiculous thing about gas prices? And you could extrapolate this to eggs. They did it with eggs. They did it with bacon. They did it with baby formula. I could go on and on and on, right? No response from the Democrats. So I was screaming to people that I knew in the White House, social media, there are social media people. I'm saying, we're getting killed in this issue. Can you give me some information on gas prices so I can fight back, please, and rebut the lies? Finally, somebody in the administration put out a 14-paragraph bullet point memo on why gas prices went up. Sent it to me. What am I supposed to do with this? Wipe my ass with it? Like, what? How can you want me to try to explain that they're putting stickers on gas pumps? Don't give me a 14-paragraph memo. What am I supposed to do with that? So this is the problem, is that Republicans are very good at condensing things down into very simple messaging. Build the wall, lock her up, whatever it is, deport the migrants. And Democrats always respond with an essay, because I don't know why they don't do it, either because they're not good at it or they think it's beneath them or anti-intellectual or dumbing down
Yes.
discourse.
Yes.
But you know what? That stuff all works. It works.
Well,
Wins elections.
it's like going to a gunfight with a knife. This is what they do. And you're right. Democrats, it's beneath them. They're not going to lie, at least the same way. They're not going to be evil. Democrats don't do what Trump and Republicans are doing right now and have done for the last 10 years. And so
let me ask you.
You have to make a decision. Either come to the gunfight with a gun or don't show up.
So right around 3.5 million migrants entered the United States during Trump's presidency last time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a number that probably nobody knows about, right? So we had 3 million migrants come into the country so we didn't have like a sealed, his messaging is our border was sealed. So many of those 3.5 million migrants committed crimes, committed bad crimes. Would a Democratic politician ever dream of taking a crime committed by a migrant who came into the United States while Trump was president and make an ad out of that?
No.
No Democrat would do that.
No.
But that was Trump's entire campaign. He spent more money on ads about migrants who committed crimes than any other issue by far. That's what he spent the most money on. And you know what? It worked.
You know what's interesting? I'm going to inject my own life into this for a second because it's something that's shocked the shit out of me for so many years. In 2006, my wife was murdered by an undocumented immigrant. I wrote a New York Times op-ed about it in 2016, right before the election. And my view is that she was killed by a brutal murderer who had a disregard for human life. She wasn't killed by an immigrant per se, okay? There's a lot of white guys in prison for killing people, right? No one has ever contacted me. You know how they have the angel moms? No one ever said, look, we need this guy to talk about the reality of this situation, that immigrants aren't inherently criminal. We just stayed away from it. No one ever asked me to speak out or join or take a position publicly. I've done it on my own. And I think you're right. I think it's just they don't understand how to fight back on certain issues, which the other side is very, very good at.
The other problem is there's a lot of fear of fringe elements of the base that Republicans don't really worry about. Republican, their party is very monolithic. It's very much, there are some variations, but not many. They're pretty much in line on almost every issue. Maybe foreign policy, there's some divergence, right? How much we should be involved in Ukraine. But like the Democratic Party sometimes is paralyzed by, they can have a message which would be popular, but it would also anger 5% of the party.
Right.
Like I put out the tweet this morning because right now the Trump administration, what they are going to do over the next few months is they are going to tout deportations. And they're going to be putting it out like crazy. Videos of them putting migrants on planes and deporting them. This is all we're going to hear about every day for the next month at least. But, the counter argument to that is the Biden administration deported about 1 million people a year.
Yeah, so did
Obama.
But
the Biden administration never talked about that. Trump was able to put out this messaging like, the border was on lockdown when I was president. It opened up. Biden let everybody in, and but the reality is Biden was deporting. Deportations went way up under Biden, way more than Trump, way more, like double Trump's deportations. So if the Biden administration really wanted all these people to come here and stay here, why are they deporting people like crazy?
This is where our conversation, though, is becoming full circle because unlike Biden and Obama, Trump ran on a policy basically that was, let's get rid of scary black and brown people. So that's why he has to promote it every day.
But Biden was actually doing it. But so I kept saying, why isn't Biden or Harris or anybody talking about the fact that look, we're deporting more people than Trump did.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was told by people behind the scenes was, if we said that,
Mm-hmm.
a chunk of the party would be furious.
Absolutely.
And they would be upset
Mm-hmm.
with us. So we can't use that argument. So the best argument to counter Trump's number one issue, Democrats were afraid to make that argument
Mm-hmm.
because they were afraid of a piece of their own base. And that happens on a lot of issues.
Sure. Well, to your point, Kamala was the quote unquote border czar. And this was a big issue for her. This was a big question throughout her truncated campaign. How is she going to address that question? And what is she going to say that will let voters know that the policy under her would be different than the policy under Biden, which ended up being her biggest gaffe when she was asked that, what would you do differently? And she said nothing. So, yeah, you're 100% right. This is the special sauce of Trump and congressional Republicans, the right-wing media ecosystem, is that they give two fucks about that kind of stuff. They say what they feel, and they find their base. And I don't know how Democrats are ever going to do the same, because to your point, they're just too fractured that way. And 5%, that's the difference between winning and losing an election these days.
That's right. So you can't worry. The Democratic Party is very much a coalition party of many different groups, many small groups it's sort of like a quilt is the best way I think of it, is all these diverse, and you have very pro-Israel Jews and you have very pro-Gaza Muslims in the Democratic Party together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Republican Party doesn't have to worry about things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that. They're all pro-Israel, 100%. Trump can come out. Trump has the liberty during the Israel issue to come out and just say, pave Gaza, bomb the shit out of it, make it a parking lot and build condos. And there isn't one Republican who's going to be bothered by that.
Right.
Can you imagine a Democrat saying anything like that? I mean,
No.
It'd be civil war within the party. So it's the strength of the Democratic Party is the diversity of the people, the ideas, and all of that. It's also an Achilles heel in some ways, too.
Sure. Well, Trump and Republicans, their strategy has always been, we just need 51%. And in this past election, we just need 49.8%. Democrats try to make everybody happy, which is really what you're saying. And that's where the shit hits the fan, in my opinion.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to kind of go at your own base and just say, this is how it is. And I think Obama was able to do that, on some issues. So just say, look, I'm not doing that. But I think his own charisma and personal popularity was able to sort of overcome that. And Biden and Harris did not have that magic to be able to do that. And I don't think they necessarily had the confidence to do that in their own personal popularity. They didn't feel like they could overcome that, and they felt like they had to make everybody happy. So look, what we really need right now is national leaders, because we have so much talent. I don't want to make this all negative. To me, the talent is in the governors. We have amazing governors who are young all over the country. Westmore in Maryland, Whitmer in Michigan, Shapiro, Beshear in Kentucky, Newsom.
Cooper.
We could go on and on. The talent is there, right? But those people need to be elevated into national leaders. They can't, under normal circumstances, you would say for those governors, just run your states and worry about your states because that's your job as a governor. But right now, there is such a vacuum of leadership at the top because our congressional leaders are not great leaders. And these governors are, that one or two of them needs to step up onto the national stage and take a leadership role in this party. None of them seem to be ready, except for Newsom. Newsom's the only one who's kind of got out there. He had his debate with DeSantis and he's taken on Trump. The other governors are not doing that. And I think more of them need to. The traditional way is to wait until 2026, until the presidential primary season gets rolling, and then they all come out. But I think this is an unusual time and unusual circumstances where some of these presidential contenders for 2028 need to get out on the national stage a little bit earlier than they normally would.
But you said before, and I understand, and I also on some level agree with your assessment that Democrats might be a bit apprehensive to put up another woman in 28. You mentioned Gretchen Whitmer, who would be an incredible president and also an incredible candidate, and she's from a really important state, as we now know. Is that a realistic path for Democrats, given what we now know, given the skittishness, given their inability to message, given all the stuff we're talking about? And then you mentioned Gavin Newsom, who pre-fires certainly was the object of many liberals' fantasies, doesn't come from a state that Democrats typically need, but does have that national profile that you talked about. But I think it's a little early to gauge this, but part of me feels like the fires killed his chances. Another part of me feels like as we get down the road a few months, it's going to bolster his chances.
Yeah.
It's a little early
Agreed.
to tell, you know?
No, I agree. I had the exact same thoughts when it first happened, and then sort of changed my mind because I think he's handled this pretty well, especially from a PR perspective. Because I mean, the whole national right-wing propaganda machine, Newsmax, Fox, Trump, podcasters, all honed in on him for a week straight and went after him. And he took them on himself. Because I was saying, where are the other Democratic governors coming to his defense? Did Josh Shapiro say anything? Did Wes Moore say anything? Did Beshear say anything? Like, I thought the other governors should have really rallied around Newsom, but they didn't. They left him on an island. So he had to take on the entire national Republican machine on his own, single-handedly with no help. And I thought he acquitted himself pretty damn well on that score. And I don't know that there are many other Democrats who could have withstood that as well as he did. So I agree. I thought at first it was going to be, oh man, he's screwed. And now I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe he could turn this into a strength.
Well, I think if anyone can, it actually could be him, because I think he's a very, very shrewd and charismatic politician. So I think only time will tell on that. But what do you think of the cabinet nominations? Who concerns you the most? Hexit sort of seems to be on the ropes again a little bit. They're going to vote on him tonight. Where do you think all this is headed?
I think I'm most concerned about the DOJ people, to be honest with you, like Bondi and Patel, the intelligence people for sure, Radcliffe and Gabbard. I don't think Gabbard is going to be confirmed. If I had to bet on one person not to be confirmed, it would be Gabbard. Obviously, I have very grave concerns about RFK Jr., who I think those are probably the two nominations that are the closest as far as the best chance to not be confirmed is RFK and Gabbard. I think RFK is not going to get enough Republican votes. The only question is going to be, is he going to pull a couple of Democrats, like Fetterman and a couple others? So it could be actually be like two Democrats. Bernie could be Bernie even. And Fetterman could put RFK over the top because they've both expressed that they may vote for him, both Bernie and Fetterman. So I'm concerned about that, because I think he's an absolute fruitcake and nutcase. And I understand that they agree with him on a lot of other issues, but they aren't the issues he's being appointed for.
Right.
So you might agree with RFK about his environmental stances, but he's not going into the government to be in charge of the EPA.
Right.
I'd support him for EPA. I think he's a complete freak and a nut with a completely unstable background, and I wouldn't trust him to babysit my dog. But I kind of like him with the EPA, but he's not going into the EPA. He's going into health. And so I think that he's a big problem. But I think the intelligence people, CIA, if Tulsi Gabbard goes in there with Radcliffe, I'd be very, very concerned about information going to our enemies, especially Russia, from us. I'm very concerned about that. So I think Hegseth's probably going to be confirmed, but I think the Department of Defense has so many guardrails and so much institutional protections in there that hopefully we can keep him under control somewhat. But you know, he's so erratic in his behavior. He's clearly misogynist. And so who knows? I think it'd be interesting, because if he does, what I think was going to happen with Hegseth is he's going to get confirmed and he's going to do something 1 year from, he's going to be on his best behavior for a while.
Less than a year.
He's going to do something really embarrassing and horrendous a year from now. And those people who voted to confirm him are going to have to answer for that. People in swing states that are in close races in 2026. And I'm talking about Tom Tillis, people like that. But you notice some of those people, especially one, announced voting against him. And who's that? Susan Collins, who's up in Maine, you know, and I think she did the calculus and said, I can't vote for this guy and run in 2026 in Maine, which is mostly a Democratic state.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting what you say, because I agree with you. And, you know, what supports that is Trump was president once before, and he had enormous turnover, enormous. I mean, there was like multiple people in different departments heading the, you know, the defense or whatever, attorney general. How many AGs did he have? So that's not going to change. There's going to be tremendous turnover because, to your point, he has no core values. He's driven by his id. He can only see 5 seconds in front of him. So shit's going to blow up. So the question is, all this stuff we're getting so worried about, even in the worst case scenarios, if all of these people get confirmed, probably half of them won't be there in 8 months, right? I mean,
it's a good point.
I mean, it's just, so it's kind of like, all right, everybody, deep breath. Let's just, and so it dovetails into my last question. David Brooks writes in the New York Times today on how Trump will fail. The main reason, he says, is that Trump is, quote, hapless and incompetent. I happen to agree, as I believe they will soon prove to be the gang that can't shoot straight, and that this gross incompetence from top to bottom is what will ultimately save us. What do you think?
I think that the average voter didn't vote for Stephen Miller's agenda. And they're shocked right now. And the most frustrating part to me is the fact that there were so many of these low information voters who never heard, who I could give them a 10-question quiz about what things that Trump promised in the campaign. Did you know he promised to have every school in America elect their principals every year, the parents of the school? Did you know he promised that? Did you know he promised to build 10 new freedom cities in America that were going to have no government regulations? Did you know he promised that? You know, we could go through, you know, one thing after another. And I would say those low information voters would say, no, they didn't know that, to 9 out of 10 questions. And now that he's president, they're all seeing it. Did you know he was going to pardon Jan Sixers who beat cops? Did you know he's going to pardon Enrique Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes, the leaders of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, both doing over 20 years in prison? No, they didn't know that. And they didn't vote for that. You know, they voted to deport migrants and have the price of eggs go down. That's what they thought they were getting. And suddenly what they're getting is this incredibly draconian, racist agenda of Stephen Miller. And I think it's starting to now hit them in the face, that, oh my God, you know, at least I hope so. I hope that's going to happen over time. And I think with the Ukraine war, you know, he promised it would be over in 24 hours. And 6 months from now, when nothing's changed, I would hope that some of them are going to go, wait a minute. I thought you said you were going to stop this war, and what are you doing? So yeah, I think I think it's two things. I'll go further than Brooks. I think it's his bumbling incompetence. I agree with that point, but also his overreach, his belief that he has this, or assertion that he has this mandate, this huge mandate to enact revolutionary change that we have not seen since FDR. It's like the inverse FDR, where you're completely transforming American society in the other direction that FDR took it in. And I don't think that 49% he got thought that they were voting for that. A chunk of them did, 30%, but not the whole 49. And when will we know if that's the case? We'll know with the midterms, right? We'll know that will be the American public's verdict on his first year in office. And so we'll see.
And to your point, and I say this all the time, we don't need all of his 77 million voters to change their mind about the Republican Party. We just need 3 or 4 million of them. And that's
by the way, let's circle back to how we started this. In 2018, in 2022, and in 2018 and 22, Donald Trump was not on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And a chunk of those Trump voters didn't show up.
Yep.
And so that will also happen. Trump is a lame duck. He's not running again. He's not on the ballot in 2026. So that chunk of people who don't really identify as Republicans, they identify as Trumpists, are not going to show up.
No, I think that's an important bookend to this conversation, as you pointed out. And I always say to Democrats, 26 is the key. Stop whining and start winning. That's what we got to do. Focus on that. Ron, this has been great. I hope you'll come back. Thanks for coming on, and keep up the good fight.
All right. Thanks for the invitation.
All righty, take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg, and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Lengyel. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.